Today, we will quietly walk through one day in the Wild West and notice how much of the familiar disappears already by dawn. No chases and shootouts, only the soft rhythm of everyday life. Water, warmth, the road, simple rules. We will look without haste and understand why even a simple day seems longer than at home. We will touch on water and food, sleep and safety, long roads and dust, prices and heavy coins, the light of a lamp and silence that is not always silence. We will peek into a workshop and a laundry, pass by a saloon and a post station, hear the click of the telegraph. We will learn how they planned the day without outlets and alarm clocks, why thirst set the routes and cleanliness required a schedule. We will calmly gather these details into a clear picture and leave worries at the door. The frontier stretches with sparse lights along long roads, and settlements grow where there is water, a crossing, or a post station. The rhythm of the day is set by the sun, the well, and distances, and the familiar city bustle here dissolves into dry wind and the creak of boards. People live simpler, not out of romance, but out of necessity. Warmth has to be obtained, water carried, the route thought out in advance. In the evening it becomes quieter, but this silence is fragile, like thin glass. One slam of a door is enough to remind you of the nearness of night and of strangers' steps. The day holds on basic things, and every little detail has weight. The warm light of the lamp is saved, counting oil and wick. Stocks of grain and salt are recorded in the head more precisely than on paper. The road is chosen by wells and shelters, not by the shortest line on a map. Our calm companions are simple and clear. A traveler with a dusty hat, a farmer listening to the wind, a blacksmith who with one heat warms both iron and the room, a laundry with steam above the tubs. The saloon serves as both a notice board and a place of rumors, the post station, a quiet node of news, and the telegraph click measures out other people's events without hastening local life. Dawn comes earlier than habits, and the cool air tickles the fingers, stretching them toward the warmth of the stove. The boards of the porch respond underfoot, and the morning reminds, to start the day means to find water and fire. The well is not on every corner. The bucket pulls downward, the chain creaks, and on the way back they carry the water slowly, trying not to spill a drop. Thirst draws a map of routes for the whole day, and the drier the road, the more important each mug is. Food without fanfare and packaging teaches patience. The bread is dark and dense, the soup viscous, the meat, as occasion allows, when it came about and when there was enough strength. They cook slowly, eat unhurriedly, listening to the warmth of the bowl as to a small home fire. Calories come at the price of time and labor, and therefore are valued not for taste, but for reliability. The road, meanwhile, is longer than it seems at dawn. The wheels leave shallow furrows in the dust, and the horse becomes both transport and care, and a mute conversation about whether this path is worth one more mile. Money is felt with fingers, not a screen. The coins are heavier than habits. They ring in the pocket and remind of the weight of expenses. Salt costs noticeably, nails, almost like promises, and even a small purchase turns into a small event that is discussed with a look and a nod. Silence, it would seem, should come by itself, but it is not obliged to be silence. The saloon hums and laughs, the street whispers with rare steps, somewhere a dog barks, somewhere a door slams. Rest is something you protect, not receive automatically, and you prepare for it just like for the road. Cleanliness is a schedule, not a whim. The water is heated for a long time, the soap is crumbled sparingly, laundry gathers half a day into one big gesture, after which the drying fabrics smell of warmth and simplicity. Work without outlets sounds even, the forge breathes heat, the laundry, steam, the carpentry shop, with wood dust, and a letter is written by a lamp, watching as the ink slowly sets on the paper. Energy is measured in muscles and time, and therefore evening comes not by the clock, but by the tiredness of the hands. Communication comes in waves. The telegraph is fast but short, like a sigh. A letter is slow, but carries the voice of the paper and the warm intonation of the handwriting. News doses itself, and because of this, the world becomes quieter. What is important will endure until tomorrow, and what is fuss will dissolve in the dust of the road. Night asks for simple guarantees. The door is braced, the lamp is extinguished, the horse is under a shelter, the windows are thin, but thoughts become softer. Sleep comes earlier, because the oil is not infinite, and morning is already near, and everything will start again with water and fire. Weather writes the plan before anyone speaks, and it keeps writing as the day moves. A thin cloud drifts over the sun and turns a sure route into a maybe. A sudden wind leans into the door and cancels a visit that felt important only minutes ago. Rain slides across the plain, turns dust into glue, deepens every track, and gives each cart a heavier voice. On the hottest days, shade becomes a moving destination you chase from porch to porch, from cottonwood to barn wall. The sky is the first calendar and the last word, and people learn to read it the way they read faces. Tools accept this rhythm and fail in their own quiet order. A strap loosens, a nail bends, a hinge sighs and asks for oil. None of it is dramatic. Repairs are not an interruption here. They are part of the day, like water and bread. You lay the tool down, breathe, fix the small thing, and feel that every repair is a promise that tomorrow will start. Animals are partners, not props, and each one teaches a small language you carry in your hands. The horse reads the ground better than boots do, slowing on soft sand, stepping lighter on the hard pan, testing the ford with a careful hoof. A mule argues, sets its own pace, then saves the load by getting stubborn at the right moment. Chickens measure morning. Their soft talk fills the yard before the light does. Cattle draw maps to water with their steps, and their low voices say more about the weather than any paper. You learn their moods, and they learn your voice. Neighbors arrive slowly and matter deeply. A borrowed ladle, a spare blanket, a word carried from station to farm. News is social before it is written. A visit to help lift a beam becomes a shared meal, and a shared meal becomes a small memory that will stand up to a long winter. Sunday is less a day than a rhythm. Hands pause, voices soften, chores become lighter, and you remember that rest has its own kind of work, noticing the people who make the place feel steady. Fire is comfort and caution, both held in the same match. A flame warms the room and keeps stories close. A stray spark reminds you to watch the floorboards and the straw by the door. Ash speaks of yesterday's meals, and a good cook can read it like a ledger. Too hot, too fast, just right for bread. Smoke finds the rafters and writes a quiet line across the evening. Lamps ask for attention you give without thinking. You trim the wick, wipe the chimney, measure the oil, and turn the light down until the room hums instead of glares. In that soft circle of light, tools look cleaner, faces look gentler, and even a rough table seems to rest. Health is simple and careful, shaped by what is on hand and by what is known. A clean cup, a boiled cloth, a bundle of herbs from a trusted hand, a pot of water kept just below a simmer for the one who needs it. Rest is a remedy you schedule, not a luxury you hope for, and someone always reminds another to sit, to drink, to breathe. Pain is listened to, not ignored, because ignoring has a cost that arrives with interest. A splinter is not small if it lives in the palm that lifts the bucket. A cough is not minor if the air is cold, and the distance to help is measured in miles. So the day includes small rituals, washing hands even when the water is dear, airing blankets when the wind is kind, turning the mattress straw, keeping boots dry, checking the rope for burrs. These are not chores in the way city chores are. They are the quiet fence around tomorrow. When the stars arrive, distance feels smaller and more real at the same time. Roads turn to threads tied to a single lamp, a porch light in the dark like a held note. The wind lowers its voice and moves around the house as if it remembers the shape. Somewhere a coyote speaks, somewhere a gate clicks, and the telegraph far off sends brief sparks of other people's nights down a wire you will never see. If the sky is clear, it becomes a ledger of cold light. You recognize a few steady patterns and accept the many you do not know. It is enough to see them and let them stand where they are. You count what is done and let the rest wait. Lists can sleep too. Sleep does not need to be called twice. From all this, one soft insight follows and settles in. A day becomes long when every basic thing asks for time: water and heat, light and distance, repair and care. The work is not cruel, just constant, and constancy wears a person in a way that shows, not as drama, but as a steady line around the eyes and a calm in the voice. When the base of life stands on effort, even small wins feel large. A bucket filled without spilling. Bread risen in a room that would not hold warmth an hour ago. A hinge that swings quiet after a patient hand has met it with oil. These are not trophies, yet they are proof. They say, "Today held." This understanding is pleasant to carry into sleep. A switch, a tap, a paved path are quiet riches, and gratitude loosens the chest the way a warm mug loosens the hands. Let the room dim a little more and let your shoulders set themselves down. Notice the weight of the blanket as something that keeps rather than holds. Inhale for a quiet count of 4. Exhale for 6. Do it again, slower, letting the breath arrive and leave like a small tide against a simple shore. If a thought asks for attention, let it take one breath with you, and then let it sit. The night can carry what is heavy. The morning can decide what is next. If these calm walks help, you can save this episode and return to it when the day has been loud. A familiar path is easier to find in the dark. Subscribe if you like gentle journeys like this, so the next one arrives without effort. Tell me which era you want to stroll through next, or which small place on the map you would like to visit quietly with plenty of room to breathe. Morning begins as a list you carry in your hands rather than in your head. The pump handle gives 3 resistant pulls before it remembers its job. The stove accepts kindling if you speak to it with patience. Bread from yesterday becomes today's toast. Coffee becomes a warm reason to stand still for a minute and listen to the yard. Harness leather stretches itself awake. The broom finds the corners the wind made overnight. It is not busy so much as steady, like a low song you already know. By midday, the sun makes its own rules, and you respect them. Work moves to the shade and takes smaller bites. Water waits in a covered bucket, and you learn to drink before you feel thirsty. A hat is not clothing, it is policy. The road throws heat back at the ankles, and the porch floorboards turn cool like a second well. Time lengthens in the middle of the day, so you shorten your motions to match it. Timekeeping is simple, honest, and enough. A shadow on the porch post gives you noon with no argument. A small watch, if you have one, gets wound the same way every evening and trusted the same way every morning. A bell in the distance says more than numbers ever could. Start, pause, return. The sky keeps the master schedule and shares it with anyone willing to look up. Trade is a conversation that smells of wood and flour. The general store holds thread, matches, nails, and new talk. A ledger remembers who owes what, and nobody rushes the arithmetic. A sack of beans goes home in a hand that knows its weight. Coffee is ground while you wait, and the sound of it makes the room feel certain. Sometimes a catalog sits under the counter like a folded horizon, promising what a wagon can deliver if the river behaves. Houses are kept the way tools are kept, with attention and patience. A loose shingle comes down and goes back up straighter. Chinks between logs get a new press of clay when the wind starts to whistle. Hinges learn to move without complaint after a tin lid gives up a small circle of oil. A door latch that catches on the first try is a private victory, big enough to carry you through the next chore. Food prefers plans over wishes. Meat learns smoke and becomes tomorrow. Apples learn air and become dry rings on a string across the kitchen. Jars wait for fruits that will arrive in their month and not before. A cool corner under the floor keeps potatoes quiet. Spices are careful and rare, but salt is certain, and certainty tastes good after a long hour. Distance changes what patience means. A letter rides farther than you ever will and arrives when it has taught itself the way. A parcel with a needed part takes its time and takes yours with it. So you learn to work around what is missing, and the work around becomes the work itself. When the parcel finally comes, it is not a surprise. It is a handshake with the week you just lived. Safety is not a wall. It is a set of layers that agree with each other. The dog knows where to sleep to hear what matters. The lantern has a place it always returns to. The path between the house and the barn is worn enough that your feet know it without your eyes. A neighbor is not close, but close enough, and that is a different kind of comfort that sits well in the chest. Joy is small on purpose. A fiddle takes the edge off the dark and gives the room a center. A pocket knife turns a scrap of wood into a quiet shape that smooths under the thumb. A book reads shorter by lamplight and longer by memory. Children count stars as if they can put them away for the winter, and someone names the bright ones with the old names because the old names hold still. If you are still awake, let the house finish its sentence without you. The stove cools like a lake at dusk. The last cup dries on the rack. The chair keeps the shape of your day for when you come back to it. Pull the quilt until the air at your collar feels kind. Inhale for 4, hold for a brief half step, and let the breath go for 6. Imagine a path from your door to the well that you could walk with your eyes closed. Now let the path keep going past the fence, past the cottonwood, past the last gate, until it becomes only night, and the night becomes quiet enough to carry you. The schoolhouse keeps a mild promise to the day. 1 room, many ages, a bell that knows only 2 songs. Slate takes the mark and gives it back when you ask with a wet rag. The reader passes from hand to hand, and a whisper of letters becomes a story that lasts longer than the firewood pile. Chalk dust hangs in the light like slow snow, and the teacher's voice makes a plain map of the world that stretches just far enough to be kind. Clothes are kept the way fences are kept. A needle lives in a bit of cloth, and a tin of buttons is a small fortune that clacks like rain. Patches turn elbows honest and make knees brave again. Boots get another sole when the old one has told its last mile, and a length of waxed thread sings a quiet line through leather. When something holds together under work, the day thanks you without words. Rivers are not problems, but agreements. A ferry rope hums and tells you how the current thinks. A ford asks for patience and a long look at the bottom. Horses step wide and steady, and you step with them, learning the water's grammar one cool sentence at a time. On the far bank you breathe and the world feels earned. Heat has its rules and cold has its own. Summer stacks its hours and asks you to move slower than your pride wants. Winter writes white ferns on the window and makes the stove the middle of the house. Wood becomes a calendar. Split now, warm later. A pan of ice knocked from the bucket keeps a ring on the ground like a quiet moon, and the water after tastes cleaner for the bother. Laundry is a weather task and a rhythm. Water warmed, soap shaved, boards leaned at the same angle every time. Steam lifts the room, knuckles learn a steady pace, and cloth remembers its shape. Lines pull straight across the yard and the wind signs its name on every sleeve. By evening, the house smells like a reefed sail and a long day done right. Market day is a soft theatre of needs and answers. Eggs become lamp oil, a sack of flour becomes new twine, a borrowed tool becomes a returned favour with a slice of pie on top. The ledger keeps score without judgment, and if the figures tilt, the season will level them. Talk carries news farther than the road does. A calf born early, a bridge passable again, a new preacher with a kind way. Strangers are measured by the weight they take from the room and the weight they leave. A plate finds the table for a traveller before he asks. A bedroll in the corner is not a question, only a place set aside for when the sky turns. In the morning, someone leaves kindling under the ash in the stove for the next set of hands. The code of the road is written in small gifts you do not announce. Rules are simple because memory is long. A gate is left as it was found. A horse is watered before a story is finished. A handshake decides more than paper ever will, and a quiet apology mends faster than a nailed board. Trouble is rare not because people are saints, but because distance makes grudges heavy to carry. The myth of constant danger fades under daylight. Iron is heavy, powder is dear, and most hands would rather lift fence rails than raise a gun. Time is spent on leather, seed, water, and words. The loud times do come, but the quiet times build the house that outlasts them. What endures is the patient part. At night, the telegraph ticks like a nested clock, and you picture far towns as coals along a wide grate. A train, if one passes, is only a low line on the horizon that stitches distance without pulling it tight. Coyotes write their brief notes and file them under the stars. The lamp lowers, the room accepts its own darkness, and the bed fits you the way a glove fits after a season's work. If sleep still stands a step away, walk the day back in reverse with small pieces. The latch that caught on the first try, the bucket set down without a drop lost, the hinge that swung without complaint. Let each thing close like a book you will find again on the same shelf. Inhale for 4, hold for a gentle half-beat, and let the breath go for 6. Think of the well, the path, the gate. Think of the sky keeping its place for you. Now let the sky go, and let the breath keep going in its stead. A map out here is mostly kept behind the eyes. Trails learn your boots and then vanish into grass that stands as high as a stirrup, so you keep landmarks the way you keep friends. A bent cottonwood that points like a finger, a pale bluff with a seam of chalk, a windmill that sings a single note in the south breeze. Compass needles are useful, but so is the way the sun warms one side of your face before noon and the other after. At night, a rough triangle of stars above the barn roof says more than pages ever could. You make little agreements with distance and keep them, and distance keeps a few with you. Work gathers into circles whenever it can. A barn raising is measured less in timbers than in shoulders that arrive early and leave late. Lunch is passed up a ladder like a late harvest. Bread, beans, coffee, words. The new frame goes from guest to claim while children stack offcuts into little cities in the yard. By dusk, the roofline closes like a mouth after a long song, and you can feel the place breathe differently. Sleep afterward is not heavy so much as certain. Cloth keeps stories you cannot tell in a hurry. A quilt grows from quiet pieces on a long table, each square a small memory kept in colour. Work shirts worn thin at the elbows, a dress saved from a better day, a scrap given by a neighbour you see more often in winter. Needles move with the pace of talk. The pattern teaches patience that threads into the rest of life. When the quilt is done, it does not announce itself. It simply keeps a body warm and makes the room look more like it belongs to someone. Food learns time and returns it as calm. Butter appears from a steady arm, cream turning into gold with a soft thud that announces itself only to the one doing the work. Candle wicks dip again and again until light has a shape you can hold. Pickles find their balance between vinegar and summer and wait on a shelf with the patience of proper stone. The taste of winter is planted in late summer, jar by jar, and when the lid gives its small surrender in January, the room smells like an old promise kept. Tools become relatives if you keep them long enough. A plane earns a smoother voice under a block of beeswax. A saw that has been set and sharpened by the same hand for years moves like a thought you do not have to finish. The anvil keeps the ring of every day it has seen, and you can hear last winter's repairs faintly when the hammer finds the sweet place. You do not fear breaking things, you fear forgetting how to mend them, so the bench stays swept, and the small tin of screws sits where it always sits, like a friend who never leaves before you do. Water is both work and gift, and the windmill makes peace between them. The pump's head nods to the breeze as if in conversation, and the trough answers with a thin silver grin. Children learn to cup a hand against the spout to drink without soaking their sleeves. Dogs learn to wait their turn. Chickens learn the sound that means a better day. When drought hints at itself from the far horizon, you notice how sound travels farther and how people speak closer. A filled barrel is worth more than a fine word. Medicine is a small bag and a large memory. A few bottles are labeled in careful ink, but more knowledge lives in the habit of boiling what should be boiled, airing what should be aired, and resting what must rest. A splint comes from a fence slat and a strip of an old sheet, and somehow the hand learns to make it lie kind. When a midwife's lantern shows up in the dark, people feel braver than they did an hour ago. Fear does visit, but it seldom sits at the table alone. Someone brings tea and steady talk and escorts it to the door. Letters are a second life folded into paper. A stamp moves farther than feet will go this year, and the envelope comes home with dust from places you will only picture. Ink leans a bit where the writer smiled or worried, and that tilt tells more than the news itself. You read slowly, you put the letter back carefully, and for a week your day has a new small center you do not have to explain. When you write in return, you leave the last inch of the page empty, the way you leave a porch step for anyone who might need it after dark. Music is what the house does when it wants to feel bigger. A fiddle can turn a kitchen into a town hall, and a harmonica can make a fence line feel less alone. Feet find the old patterns without asking permission from the mind. After the last tune, the room seems to keep breathing in time, and even the kettle feels like it is keeping beat. Outside, the night pretends it heard nothing, but it stands a little closer to the windows for a while. Season by season, the place teaches you the graceful version of stubborn. Spring asks for faith when the road tries to swallow the wagon to its axles. Summer asks for pace when pride wants speed. Autumn asks for order and gives it back as relief. Winter asks for forethought and pays in long, quiet mornings that feel earned. You learn to greet each ask with the right kind of yes. The yes is not loud, it is simply steady. If you are not yet asleep, let the day tilt toward the pillow the way a shadow moves along a fence. Picture the porch in late light, the broom resting where it belongs, the pump quiet and certain, the door latch that catches on the first try. Feel the quilt as weight that keeps rather than holds. Inhale for 4, hold for a soft half beat, and release for 6. Imagine the map behind your eyes, the bent cottonwood, the pale bluff, the windmill, and let each landmark drift a little farther away, like boats untying themselves without hurry. When the last one slips ashore, keep only the breath, and let it carry you the rest of the way. Storms keep an old grammar everyone learns by ear. Thunderheads stack like careful boxes along the rim of the land, and the air thickens until even a nail driven yesterday feels looser. Chickens fold themselves early, horses turn their faces to the smell that comes before rain. Windows are pulled nearly shut and left a finger's width for breath. Ropes are checked, lids weighted, tools slid beneath a bench. Then the first hard drops write brief Morse on the porch roof, and the yard changes color in a minute. Lightning counts out its own arithmetic, and people count along without fear, only attention. When the edge passes, the world stands rinsed and quiet, as if someone has just finished speaking kindly. Sometimes rain keeps its distance and the lesson is different. Barrels wait with patient mouths. A tin dipper hangs like a bell that hasn't been rung in days. Morning work moves earlier to borrow the cool, and evening work lingers to borrow the shade. Dew becomes a small gift you learn how to gather with leaves and sleeves. Coffee tastes clearer when a day's worth of water is measured at dawn and found enough. When a cloud finally gives, even the dust seems to say thank you. Travel arrives as a slow conversation with the road. A peddler's cart creaks to a stop and opens like a drawer. Needles, ribbon, tins that keep tea dry, a mirror that throws a small square of light onto a beam. Deals are made in sentences as careful as the stitching on a good hem. A watch fob changes pockets. A child is measured by a length of string for boots to be fetched on the next round. News comes rolled in with the wheels. A bridge can be crossed again. A new hand at the station works steady. A cousin has found land where the soil smiles at beans. When the cart leaves, the yard feels larger, but not lonelier. Notebooks keep the sort of truths that make days easier to hold. An almanac sits with a folded page where the moon's age meets the planting. A ledger remembers who brought eggs and who carried them home as lamp oil. Seed envelopes keep small futures in paper that has learned to be delicate. A line scrawled at the end of a long day, fence mended, calf turned, rain at last, reads later like a hand on the shoulder. You do not write for history. You write so tomorrow can find its footing without stumbling. Bread begins the night before and forgives a good deal if you show up on time. A starter sleeps in a jar like a quiet pet, waking to warm water and flour with a familiar sigh. The bowl wears a towel cap and waits where drafts are few. In the morning, dough gives way and then pushes back like a polite argument. Heat makes the last decision, and the room smells like a promise that kept itself without help. Cornmeal keeps company in its sack. Coffee stands ready with its small thunder. A pinch of spice travels farther here than a mile on the road. Harvest does not shout, it hums. Wheat stands in shocks that look like people leaning to listen. Hay lifts from field to wagon in a rhythm that teaches arms how to speak without words. The granary takes its breath in dusty sunlight, and mice move out for a while as if they were always guests. Supper finds the table with an extra spoon because someone who swore they would not stay for a bite has already set down their hat. Sleep afterward is not just deep, it is right. Winter writes its own instructions in windows and along door frames. Frost ferns explain quiet in a language without letters. Mittens remember hands. Socks pick up the shape of a foot and decide to keep it. Candles stand like small teachers that never raise their voice. Books travel farther in cold months. A chapter read by the stove becomes a room you can visit again at noon when the pail needs filling. Outside, the world keeps its breath low and even. Spring unknots what winter tied. Fences learn to stand straighter. Gates remember to swing. Calves arrive with knees that seem too new for the ground. A foal looks surprised by its own legs and then trusts them as if it had always known how. Chicks make the yard sound young. Mud claims boots and then returns them, and everyone laughs the way people do when the rules are soft and generous for a minute. Neighbors share a calendar that has no numbers. A barn dance spreads like warmth from a stove. A fiddle finds the key, boots find the floor, and even those who do not dance keep time with a heel against a chair leg. A prayer spoken before a meal is brief and specific. Thank you for the safe wheel, the mended hinge, the letter that said good news. Goodbyes take longer than arrivals and include small packages that find their way into pockets no one will check until morning. Stories travel the way bread does, started in one house, carried warm to another, sliced so everyone can take a piece and feel steadier. Some are about the old country and have corners you can lean on. Some are about this week and have edges that will round off by winter. Children ask for the one about the lantern in the storm again, and the lantern grows braver each time, though the storm does not need to. Adults listen, pretending they do not. Work with leather teaches your palms to think. A strip becomes a rein. A scrap becomes a loop that keeps a tool from wandering. A belt gains a new hole where the day's appetite decided to live. The smell of oil and hide sits in the room like a second kind of weather. When the punch finds its mark and the rivet settles true, the sound is small, but it lasts. Quiet trades fill the corners of the week. Soap takes shape in patient molds. Lye and fat come to terms without drama if the stirring is steady. Tallow learns wick, wick learns flame, flame learns how to lower itself without sulking. A crate becomes a stool if you ask nicely with a saw and a square. Nothing is wasted because everything here has a second idea about what it could be. At dusk, the yard edits itself. Tools return to hooks they trust. A rope that worked hard today coils in a way that will make tomorrow easy. The pump handle leans just so, and the bucket knows where to wait for morning. A porch chair takes a breath and keeps it for you. The first star shows up without announcement, and the second follows like a friend arriving late but sure. If sleep is still one room away, walk the house by memory. The latch that knows your hand, the hinge that swings without complaint, the jar where the starter rests, warm and patient. The boots turn to the door, ready to find the path when the sky is only a guess. Let your shoulders learn the shape of the quilt. Inhale for a quiet 4, hold for a soft half beat, exhale for 6, do it again, slower. Picture the telegraph ticking far off like a kind clock in another room. Let it speak for the rest of the world. You, for now, are off duty. The blacksmith's day has a steady heartbeat that settles the whole street. Bellows breathe in and out until the coal turns the color of a new peach, and the anvil answers like a kind bell that never hurries anyone. Hooves ring on packed dirt, iron shoes glow and lose their temper at just the right moment, and a bent hinge returns to the right idea about how a door should move. Folks bring broken things in with the same expression they wear when they carry a sleeping child, and they leave lighter even when the bundle weighs the same. A nail made on a quiet afternoon will hold a gate that keeps a winter out, and that thought makes the room warmer without more coal. When the tongs finally set a piece on the sill to cool, the air smells like patience learning to stand up straight. The telegraph office speaks another language, all dashes and dots that sound like rain with opinions. The operator listens with his head a little to the side, as if the wire were a person who prefers to whisper. Slips of paper pile like small white fish, each one with a message that belongs to someone else's day. News does not rush here. It arrives on its feet, knocks, and waits to be invited in. A wedding becomes a wire, a birth becomes a grin that cannot be hidden, a shipment becomes a relief that you can almost drink. When the key finally rests, the room stays quiet in a way that feels earned, and the clock on the wall seems pleased to have been right all along. At the stage stop, the world changes faces and then changes back. Teams clatter in with dust that turns the light buttery, and passengers unfold themselves like maps that have been folded a little too long. The table is plain, but knows exactly what to do. Stew that remembers onions, bread that forgives travel, coffee that gives the road a kinder voice. Harness buckles learn each hostler's hands, wheels get a brief inspection that counts as a promise, and a boy runs water to the trough the way a river runs to the sea. In 20 minutes, the place feels as if it has always been quiet, and then the horn sounds again, and the road picks up its sentence where it left off. Gardens practice a slower kind of arithmetic and always get the answer right in their own time. Beans climb a string as if they could hear music no one else does, and corn lifts its tassels like small flags agreeing with the wind. Pumpkins think outward thoughts and take the yard more seriously every week. Seed is saved in envelopes that used to hold letters, and each label is a story you can grow next year. A hand checks the soil at dusk and decides if tonight needs water, the way a mother checks a child's forehead without waking them. When frost finally visits, it does so politely, and the beds are put to sleep with straw that smells like a cupboard full of sun. Night chores are a soft tour of gratitude. The gate latch tests itself and passes. Chickens murmur a sound like rain behind curtains. The milk cow breathes slow and regular, a metronome for an old song you don't remember learning. Coals are banked until the stove wears a low red smile you can trust till morning. The lamp glass is wiped with the last clean corner of a cloth, the wick trimmed down to good behavior, and the room releases the day the way a hand releases a bucket rope after a long pull. Outside, stars number themselves, which is one job no one here minds not having. Make do is not a warning here. It is a craft that produces its own kind of beauty. A cracked crock learns the metal stitches that keep soup where soup belongs. A tin lid becomes a washer that teaches a bolt to listen. A shirt gains a patch that turns a frayed place into a story square you could carry into a quilt. Nothing leaves before it has suggested what else it could be. Even the wood shavings under the bench find a second life in the stove, and the heat they give back feels like a thank you letter from work to the hands that made it. A child's day spirals around chores the way a kite spirals around a string. Eggs are gathered in a tin pail that knows exactly how loud not to be. Lessons happen at a table that holds both sums and crumbs without complaint. A pocket holds 2 marbles, a string, and a nail that will become something unnamed as soon as a pocket knife has time to think. Questions arrive like guests and are seated by the order they knock. When the book closes at evening, the story keeps walking around the room, and someone hears it step onto the porch and sit a while in the friendly dark. Stories about danger live mostly in other people's mouths. Here, iron is heavy, powder is dear, and pride is expensive to feed. Most days choose gentler verbs. Fences are lifted, not arguments. Bread is raised, not voices. Hands learn to be right more often than they try to be loud. Trouble does show its face now and then, but quiet makes a long investment and collects interest in a house that holds together through weather. Travel over the pass is the kind of work that teaches the lungs to be polite. Pines freshen the air until even the mule seems willing to forgive the grade. A tin cup keeps its place on the saddle and catches water that tastes like a secret. The trail forgets itself in rock and then remembers in grass, and boots learn both languages. At camp, coffee asks only for time and heat, which are the 2 currencies you always have if you count correctly. The fire talks in small voices, and the bedroll learns the shape of your shoulder as if it has been practicing. By the time morning returns, it does so with the soft authority of a hymn you recognize by the second line. The pump handle remembers its job in 2 pulls instead of 3. The stove takes the match like an old friend taking your hand. Bread from yesterday becomes the first good smell. Sunlight becomes the second. A plan becomes the third and quietest. You notice how the day will likely go by the way the cat chooses its spot, and the way the wind arranges the leaves. Nothing insists. Everything agrees. If you are still awake, let the map behind your eyes settle into fewer lines. See the anvil waiting, the garden breathing, the lamp glass clear and patient. Picture the stage road as a ribbon that lies down and rests. Imagine the quilt as a small warm field that belongs only to you. Inhale for 4 and let the breath widen your ribs without effort. Hold for a soft half-beat, as if listening for a friend's footstep at the gate. Exhale for 6 and feel the bed take your weight, the way good earth takes rain. Do it again, slower, and let the night keep watch. The photographer's tent appears like a small piece of shade with a window. Suncloth glows at the seams, and inside the air smells faintly of chemicals and dust that settled politely. People arrive in their best ordinary, the good hat brushed, the clean shirt patched so carefully the patch looks like a choice. The camera regards the room like a calm animal. The lens breathes once, and everyone learns stillness together. A baby blinks, the old man straightens without calling it pain, and a woman's hands find each other as if they have always meant to. When the plate is fixed and rinsed, faces appear with a seriousness that does not feel heavy. You carry the likeness home wrapped in paper like warm bread, and for weeks the house seems to speak a new, softer language. The barber's chair has a way of holding a person steady without insisting. Hair gathers on the floor in careful drifts that tell the story of heads in all seasons. A razor sings a thin song, the strop answers in leather, and hot water loosens the news from tight throats. Beards leave and reveal the same eyes, calmer for seeing daylight again. A boy grows half an inch simply by sitting under the cape and being told he looks ready for work. Outside, wind ruffles the sweepings and takes a little of everyone's worry down the street. A small kiln behind the store keeps a private calendar. Glaze dries like weather on a quiet shore, and a pot that looked uncertain yesterday becomes sure of itself today. Cups learn to nest, bowls learn to balance, and a jug leans into its handle the way a shoulder leans into a friend. When the door opens and the warm breath of new clay meets the morning, someone will smile without needing a reason. Later, soup will taste more like soup because the bowl knows how to hold kindness as well as heat. Freight days ask for patience and give it back as order. Crates arrive with corners that remember distant hands. Paper labels carry names you say aloud once just to set them gently in the room. Coffee smells loud even through wood. A coil of rope promises 3 kinds of work you had not thought of until now. Someone's cast iron skillet returns as black as a night sky, and someone else's longed-for book rides on top of a stack of plow points, as if both were the same kind of tool. By evening, empties stand like neat punctuation in the yard, and the road has one less sentence to speak. The river keeps its mind but likes to be asked nicely. Poles learn the bottom by touch, and a skiff learns how to breathe between strokes. Fish show themselves as brief commas on the surface, and a heron turns the bank into a column of stillness. If a crossing is needed, you pick the wide, patient part of the water and say thank you by stepping light. On the other side, shoes carry a small library of prints that the next rain will read and erase. In the tiny office with the good window, someone helps words live on the right pieces of paper. Deeds, promises, births, all set down with a pen that never hurries even when people do. The clerk has a gift for choosing the sentence that fits the person and the day, and when the ribbon is tied and the seal pressed, the world feels a shade sturdier. You leave with a document that weighs almost nothing and means a great deal, and your pocket learns a new kind of responsibility. Some afternoons belong to quiet mending that looks like idleness to no one who knows better. A saddle stitch closes a day-old doubt. A hinge learns humility with a single drop of oil. A window finds its balance after a strip of beeswax makes the sash glide the way it did before last winter. These are victories that do not need witnesses. The sound they make is the small click of a thing becoming right again. The house breathes easier, and so do the people inside it. On the highland, the windmills speak to each other with arms and shadows. You can tell the hour by how far each arm has drawn across its own face, and you can tell the mood of the weather by the way the tail follows or refuses. A hawk takes a long circle that decides nothing and yet comforts everyone watching. Far off, a freight train draws a thin dark line like a closed eyelid between one town and the next. Distance is not a wall here, it is a quiet room you know how to cross. Evening gathers the way flour gathers into dough, gently, with a little warmth and a little patience. Supper sits in the middle of the table like a promise that kept itself again. Beans that learned salt and thyme, bread that remembers a careful hand, a jar of something summer left behind for winter's sake. Talk is light, but not empty, and silences are friendly. Space for the day to sit down between you and put its feet up for a minute. When the lamps are lit, the room chooses its edges and lets the rest become night. Sundays fold themselves differently, even when work still calls from the edges. A hymn in a small room makes the roof feel taller for a while. Children's shoes sound new even if they are not, and coats remember cedar. Afterward, people stand in the yard longer than weather recommends, finishing talks that began in spring and will end, maybe, in fall. The prayer that lingers is short and exact. Thank you for the safe axle, the quick rain, the neighbor who came just as the barrel leaned. Sometimes there is need in the dark, and the village knows the steps by heart. A lantern shows up where it is meant to, and hands move without deciding to. A midwife's voice steadies a room the way a sail steadies a boat. A cough is eased with steam and patience. A frightened animal is persuaded by salt and tone. When the door closes again on quiet, no one says hero, and no one needs to. The street keeps the secret, and morning claims the good work as ordinary. Grief visits too, and it is received with chairs, bread, and time. The church bell learns a slower measure, and men take off their hats in unison without thinking who started it. Shovels stand in a respectful line like tall, tired brothers. Words are said that do not reach for grandness, and that is their strength. A neighbor's field is tended by other hands for a week, and then for another. Loss does not leave quickly, but it is not left alone, and that is how people keep walking. By harvest moon, the town has learned its year again. Corn shocks like open tents dot the fields, and the granary keeps a low, patient hum. Children fall asleep on wagon quilts while adults negotiate the next season with smiles that are almost jokes. A fiddle finds the tune everyone knows how to finish, and boots answer with the kind of arithmetic that always sums to enough. The night is large, but so is the circle of light. If you are still awake, let these rooms and roads become quieter inside you. See the barber's chair turn toward the window, empty and certain. See the photographer's plate dark in its bath, about to give a face back to its owner. See the kiln cooling, the garden resting, the windmill folding its arms for sleep. Imagine the road lying down like a ribbon that has found its draw. Inhale for 4 and let the ribs widen without asking for effort. Hold for a soft half beat, the length of a polite nod at a familiar gate. Exhale for 6 and feel the bed receive you the way fresh tilled soil receives rain. Repeat, slower each time, until breath is the only work left, and the night agrees to do the rest. The print shop keeps its own slow thunder. The press breathes in ink and paper, and each pull lays down a square of mourning that will travel farther than most feet do. Type sits like a small iron forest, every letter a tree that learned discipline. Headlines are polite here, more neighbor than trumpet, and the columns speak in voices you recognize from the street. When a page hangs to dry on the twine, the room smells like effort turning into record, and the bell on the door rings the same way whether the news is large or local. You step back outside with a folded sheet that warms your hands and steadies your thoughts, as if the town had just explained itself and asked nothing in return. The mill on the creek turns grain into calm. Stone meets stone, not harshly but with an old agreement, and the whole building hums with a note you feel in your ribs more than in your ears. Sacks enter heavy with the gossip of fields and leave lighter, carrying tomorrow's bread as a promise already half kept. Dust dances in sunbeams that lean through the high window. A cat naps in the doorway like a soft opinion. The miller measures by weight and by habit. Both are accurate. When you shoulder the flour home, your steps sound different, more certain of their direction. Bees keep a gentle city under their own laws. Hives stand like tidy houses in the warm corner of the yard, and the air around them has the gold sound of work done without haste. Smoke is offered like manners, and comb is lifted the way you would lift a sleeping child. Honey thickens on the tongue with the taste of a whole summer retold. Wax cools into small, useful futures, candles that will learn the evening's pace, salves that will convince rough hands to forgive a day. You thank the bees the way you thank weather when it breaks in your favor, quietly, with both palms open. A seamstress turns fabric into intention. Chalk marks vanish under the cut, thread follows a path few would notice, and a dress becomes a room a person can carry with them. Men's shirts remember shoulders that haul and hands that hold, and the seams sit where movement likes to live. On the sill, a tomato pincushion looks like a little harvest that will never spoil. When the last hem is turned and pressed, the iron leaves a soft final sentence across the cloth, and humbleness reads as grace. At the livery, evening is a list of kindnesses. Harness is wiped until it remembers soft, hooves are picked like careful editing, and oats settle into a bin with a sound you could sleep to. Horses lean into currycombs and blink the day away. The quiet between strokes teaches a person to breathe at a wiser tempo. Lantern light turns every flank to bronze and every knotted rope into a story about how trust is made, slowly, with repetition, and without speeches. The doctor's bag smells of alcohol, leather, and pages. Instruments sit in their slots like veterans who prefer peace. Visits are part medicine and part witness. A pulse counted with 2 fingers and a whole room counted with 2 eyes. Advice often fits into 3 words: warmth, water, rest, and sometimes into the gift of sitting long enough that worry puts its head down. When the door closes behind him, the house keeps a better posture, as if reminded that bodies know a good deal about healing if given the chance. Orchards think in seasons, an answer to pruning that looks like patience from the road. Spring comes as a soft cloud of intent, summer as a heavy quiet full of bees and shade, autumn as the kind of work that smells like sugar and ladders. Baskets behave themselves when filled with fruit, hands remember to twist, not pull. Cider presses write their cider alphabet 1 letter at a time, and the first sip tastes like the color of the day. A few bruises become sauce without complaint, and nothing feels wasted because nothing is. The tinsmith has music other trades lack. Scissors sing against sheet, and a folded seam becomes more than itself with a few taps of a patient hammer. Funnels learn to pour, lanterns learn to glow without drafts, and a lunch pail becomes a promise to return at dusk. Solder blooms and then calms, like a thought that almost ran away before deciding to stay. Outside, children hold a new tin whistle, like a secret they plan to keep only until supper. Rail days move at an edge of town tempo. The platform gathers hats and parcels, the timetable flirts with precision, and the whistle writes a thin note that travels farther than good intentions. People lean forward an inch the moment before arrival, then pretend they hadn't. A kiss finds a cheek, a hand finds a shoulder, a box labeled fragile becomes light in 2 pairs of hands. When the cars pull away, the silence after is not empty. It is a room with the door just closed. Winter suppers teach the art of enough. Potatoes agree to be dependable, beans put their shoulder into broth, and a heel of bread plays farther than seems possible. Silence sits at the table without awkwardness, and the stove carries the conversation when words prefer to rest. A jar of last August opens with that small, soft pop, and everyone smiles as if an old friend had knocked precisely on time. Outside, snow edits the yard into simpler shapes, and the path from door to gate becomes a sentence you could walk in the dark. Spring repairs feel like apologies written with wood and wire. A fence that slouched learns to stand honest. A gate that sulked learns to swing. Shingles rediscover their order after the north wind tried to teach them jazz. Hands come home thorned and satisfied. In the corner of the shop, a small pile of good enough boards becomes shelves that hold more than they weigh. The house hums differently when everything shuts where it should. Evenings sometimes dress themselves in stories that belong to no single person. Someone says, "Do you remember when the creek ran backwards for an hour?" And three versions of the truth shake hands. Laughter travels a slow circle, and the lamplight grows thicker around the faces that know when to listen. Pauses stretch and do not break. The dog sighs as if seconding the motion. You feel the room decide to be more than walls and a roof for one more hour. If your eyes have not closed yet, let the town fall away in layers. The press cools, the mill sleeps, the hives hum the softest key they own. The livery settles down to hay breath and the warm tick of cooling iron. The doctor's bag waits by the door, calm as a seated elder. The rails hold their breath until morning. Inhale for 4 and let that breath find the corners of the room. Hold for a friendly half-beat, the time it takes to nod to a neighbor on a quiet street. Exhale for 6 and feel the bed answer back, steady as a good gate. Again, slower, until breath is the only task, and night, reliable as ever, finishes the page for you. A cooper's yard smells of steam, oak, and a little fire that minds its manners. Staves stand in a circle like neighbors at a meeting, each one leaning just enough to agree with the next. Hoops slide down with a low iron sigh, and a wet rag hisses where the wood needs to learn a kinder curve. The barrel swells into itself the way bread does, finding strength by fitting tight. When the bung seats and the seam holds, you can almost hear water in the future thanking the past. A good barrel is a traveling room. Beans will live there for a season, cider for a winter, nails for a long campaign against loose boards. The cooper wipes his hands, not to be clean but to be sure, and sets the new vessel in line with the ones that already know what they are. A rope walk is a long whisper you can walk inside. Hemp becomes yarn, yarn becomes strands, and strands become a promise you can tie to weather. Tar talks in its low, honest way, and the twist travels from one end of the shed to the other like a thought that never loses patience. Children learn to keep fingers clear and eyes steady, and they carry that lesson everywhere. Coils stack like sleeping snakes along a wall, and each one remembers a different job: bucket, gate, saddle, ferry. When a length is cut and whipped, the frayed ends take a breath and then behave. Boots return to a cobbler with the story of weeks pressed into their creases. Souls lift like tired pages and learn to read again under a careful hand. Awl, wax thread, and rhythm, 3 tools that turn a day around. Nails tap a steady measure that feels like a clock in a small town that never lies. When the leather drinks oil, it darkens the way soil does after rain. Laces go in with the confidence of old friends. The owner leaves taller by a 1/4 inch and richer by the mile that will now be easy. Inside a small parlor, a treadle rocks and cloth flows into use. The spinning wheel hums with a patient vowel. The loom answers with little wooden consonants. Dye pots remember walnut and onion skin. Indigo keeps its own quiet midnight in a barrel by the door. Colors come out softer than names, the way dawn comes out softer than plans. A shawl gathers a week into its warp. A rug swallows scraps and returns them as order you can step on. The house sounds different when fabric learns where it belongs. Some winters give the town an ice house and it becomes a plain miracle repeated with saws and care. Blocks lift from the pond like clear bricks and travel into a room full of sawdust that forgives everything. Men move slower than the cold and manage not to be hurried by it. Each block wrapped and settled is a vote for summer lemonade, a promise to the milk pail, a favor owed to feverish foreheads. Months later, when the ice sighs into a wash basin, the sound is as close to applause as water knows how to make. Smokehouses work in a register between patience and certainty. Hams hang like slow bells that will ring on a long day in July. Applewood gives a friendly argument. Hickory speaks more firmly. Both keep their word. Salt teaches meat how to remember itself for a season without complaining. The door opens only when it should, and the smell that drifts out is not a boast, just a reminder that foresight tastes good and keeps. Surveyors walk with a chain that never gossips and a compass that picks one truth at a time. Stakes go in with a small ceremony, and notes meet pencil the way rivers meet banks, always in the right place eventually. They make squares on a land that prefers circles and curves, but they do it gently, and the land forgives them if the fences are built kindly. A map becomes a conversation between nearby and far, and the people who use it learn how to listen to both. Once in a while, a traveling show hangs a white sheet and conjures a room full of lantern pictures. A sailboat arrives on a wall in a town that has only ever known river skiffs. A city street sparkles briefly where the feed sacks sit. The hand that turns the slide steady as a pendulum. The audience breathes together as if they shared one lung for the hour. When the light is lowered, chairs scrape, feet find hats, and the path home seems both familiar and new, like a tune played in a different key. A box of books makes its rounds like a well-fed rumor. Titles arrive with the dust of another kitchen still on their covers, and no one minds. A novel finds a shelf near a ledger. A book of sermons leans against a book of jokes, and they do not argue. Children practice their names on a flyleaf and then erase the practice with a thumb, leaving only the confidence. A bookmark made from a seed packet holds two promises at once. The quarry speaks in a language of measured echoes. Stone comes loose with a respectful crack and lies there surprised to be new. Lime kilns count slow, white breaths. Mortar learns how to persuade rock to agree with more rock. Steps carved into a bluff decide the path the same way water does, by choosing one good idea and repeating it. The wall that results looks like it grew after someone explained the plan to it carefully. Town days at the county seat broaden the horizon without hurrying the heart. A deed gets a ribbon and a seal. A seed order learns a postmark. A new hat makes an old coat remember being proud. On a bench near the courthouse, someone plays a quiet tune and does not pass a hat, because the tune is not for sale. People walk a little slower past windows, then a little faster toward home. The road back gathers them up in the usual way and sets them down where the dog already knew they would end. At dusk, kitchen tables turn into stages for small, necessary theatre. A deck of cards shuffles like a mild breeze through cedar. Someone keeps score in pencil and kindness. A candle lists slightly and is corrected by a coin under the plate. Corn husks become dolls under careful fingers, and nobody calls it a toy until a smile makes it official. The door keeps opening and closing on the same welcome. If your eyes are still open, let the tools and trades stack themselves neatly in your mind and then tuck themselves away. See the cooper's barrel tight and proud, the rope coiled with a well-earned nap, the boots pointed toward morning, the loom's threads resting in their new agreement, the ice house holding its cool breath, the smokehouse keeping its vow, the map folded once, then once again. Inhale for 4 and let the breath travel the length of a rope walk. Hold for a soft half-beat, the pause before the press kisses paper. Exhale for 6 and let the air go out of the bellows slowly, warm and sure. Again, slower, kinder. The night knows the rest of the lines, and your part now is only to listen. The sawmill works in sentences as long as the creek. A blade hums its thin line through pine, and boards slide into the world with edges that look like decisions. Sawdust lifts in warm swirls and settles on boots like a second, friendlier weather. The millwright listens with two kinds of ears, one for the belt, one for the water, and keeps both in agreement. Cats prefer the sunny sill. A pencil behind an ear keeps its place all day. When the last log tips its hat to the carriage, the yard smells like plans that will soon learn nails. In the yard beyond, bricks are made from patience, straw, and mud that knows how to keep a promise. Forms fill, smooth, and lift rows of new adobe nap under the sun like warm loaves. By evening, the day's work has edges you can count, and by week's end, the walls remember shade before they even rise. A house that learns coolness from the earth adds kindness to a summer and keeps it. Water shares itself by rule and by courtesy. A ditch boss walks the acequia with a shovel and a steady tone, opening here, closing there, reading the fall like a quiet map. Gates tick and tock, and fields drink in turn. No one takes more than their hour. No one takes less than they need. When the last board slides home, the ditch shines like a silver thread pulled through cloth, and the valley looks sewn together. The saddler keeps a bench that smells of oil and miles. A wooden tree learns skin, then padding, then stitch after stitch that will not betray a rider on a long grade. Cinch rings sit like small moons waiting for their sky. Conchos pose for a moment and then commit. When the last strap is cut true and the awl sleeps, the saddle looks ready to tell a horse a kind story about the day ahead. Silver learns gentleness under a hammer with a calm hand. A spoon takes its curve like a smile practiced in a mirror. A ring cools in a dish and remembers two names without being told. Spurs wake a quiet star at each point and promise to speak softly to a good animal. The bench light stays small and bright, and filings gather like fine glitter that won't go to waste. Brooms are grown as much as made. Broomcorn dries in a loft that keeps secrets. The bundle comes down when it is ready to listen. Wire wraps, stitching binds, and a handle learns to meet a palm without asking. They hang for a day to set their manners, then stand by a door with the mild confidence of tools that know their job. Floors and porches answer with a tidy yes. At the post office, pigeonholes keep a village sorted by name and hope. Sacks arrive with a tired thud. A stamp makes its small, satisfied sound. A letter from far away sits next to a seed catalogue that will go nowhere and still change a life. The clerk knows the gait of most folks and slides the right envelope forward before the hello is finished. In the corner, the drawer for stray letters holds its breath for one more try. Time is repaired in a room that asks for whispers. A watch opens like a tiny door. A hairspring breathes. A loop learns a brow. The tick that returns is modest and right, like a foot on a familiar stair. Clocks on the wall agree by degrees, and the repairman nods once when they land on the same minute. Outside, shadows have done their work just as well. Music finds a home in bellows and keys. A pump organ waits for feet and gives a room a spine as soon as it hears them. Hymns visit without being announced. Reels drop by when company stands up from the table. Someone who swore they could not carry a tune hums anyway and discovers that the tune was planning to carry them. Dust dances where sunlight makes a square on the floor and no one tells it to stop. Shearing day folds a whole season into an afternoon. Boards go down, hands find their rhythm, and fleece rolls like a low cloud that politely changes shape. Sheep look surprised and then relieved. The pen talks in soft hooves and the sound of new air. Later, warm water and patience turn wool into clean, springy promise. A winter from now, a child will wear a hat that remembers this room. The oven in the yard is a round, earthen moon that bakes kindness into ordinary things. A door of wood and iron keeps the heat. A palm on the dome tells the temperature better than numbers do. Beans keep counsel in a clay pot. Loaves rise to meet a morning. A dish of apples surrenders without fuss. The smell wanders down the lane like news with no bad words in it. The cemetery is kept with steady hands and a broom that knows names. Grass is trimmed to a respectful evenness. Stones are set straight the way thoughts are, one at a time. Dates speak softly. The space between them speaks of gardens, barns, songs, and weather. A bench under a cottonwood offers a place to sit until the heart catches up with the feet. No one hurries anyone here. Fares arrive like a slow grin. Ribbons find jars and pies. Quilts unfurl their quiet mathematics. A giant pumpkin holds court without bragging. Chickens preen, children judge, elders pretend not to. A fiddle tries out the air near the bandstand and decides it likes it. When dusk folds the tents, the trophies ride home beside the empty plates, and both feel deserved. A sawbuck and a stack of split wood are winter's small bank. Grain in the bin is another. Nails in a jar, candles in a row, a basket that knows exactly where eggs will land in the morning. These are the quiet riches no one tallies out loud. The mind rests better when hands have made this kind of math. Sometimes a rider changes the street just by arriving. Dust writes his name in a hand only the wind reads, and the horse drinks as if it has opinions about local water. He leaves behind a new word, a small tool, a song with an easy chorus. The town keeps what fits and lets the rest pass through without offense. Hospitality here has hinges that swing both ways. When washing is done and lamps are lowered, the house edits itself to a few good lines. Chairs push in, the ledger closes, the day's shirt hangs where morning can find it. Outside, the pump handle leans the way a shoulder leans against a friend. Stars take their post with the kind precision that makes sleep simple. If your eyes are still open, walk the town once more without moving. See the sawmill quiet, the adobe rows warm and still, the ditch closed and shining, the saddle waiting on its stand. See the silver cooling, the brooms at ease, the letters sleeping in their cubbies. Hear the small, unanimous tick from the watchman's wall. Inhale for 4 and let the breath travel the length of the acequia. Hold for a soft half beat, the pause before the stamp meets paper. Exhale for 6 and feel the bed take your weight, the way adobe takes sun. Again, slower, kinder. The night knows your route by heart and will see you home. The assay office keeps a hush that feels like concentration rather than secrecy. Scales sit steady, a flame nods under a crucible, and little paper packets carry hopes folded into corners. A man brings in a pouch of creek dust. The clerk stains a fingertip and makes a small note that means more than any excited speech could. Outside, the same creek accepts pans and patience. A swirl here, a tilt there, sand steps aside from what it has been keeping. Most days give nothing grand, just a few bright flecks that teach a lesson the land likes to repeat. Value often travels small and quiet. A wheelwright's shop turns circles out of straight lines. Spokes learn their angles on a jig that never lies. Fellows warm by the brazier and bend the way a good idea bends when the room agrees. The iron tire goes on with a hiss that sounds like relief, and water seals the promise. A finished wheel stands like a sentence that makes sense on the first read. When the cart rolls out, its new certainty spreads to the harness, the hands, the road. Milk keeps dawn company and prefers gentle hands. Cream rises and is skimmed by habit more than by measure. Butter finds itself under a steady arm that knows when to rest and when to resume. Cheese happens in quiet arithmetic. Heat, curd, press, patience, and a fresh round sits in cloth like a small moon waiting for a sky. The kitchen holds a contented living smell, and you can hear a spoon tell you when enough has become enough. The root cellar is a library of edible stories. Potatoes sleep in their bins as if they meant to be there all along. Carrots stand in sand like a polite crowd. Jars line the shelves with summer remembered in clear glass. A paper label, a neat hand, a date. These are the simple spells that bring August to February without drama. The ladder creaks kindly. The air holds cool like a promise kept. Rails have keepers you rarely meet in the paper. A section gang moves with jacks and bars and a rhythm that answers only to the gauge. Spikes sit where they should. Tie plates settle square. The handcar whirs like a toy built by weather and hands together. A rail that sings right under the hammer is a private music with public consequences. When the men lean on their tools to breathe, the track breathes with them, ready for everything that will pass. A marshal's lamp has more to do with quiet than with shouting. Boots learn every board in the boardwalk. Doors learn what a gentle knock means. Most nights are a tour of hinges that obey, of dogs that mind their line, of a town that keeps its own promises. A note tucked under a doorknob here, a window pushed to true there, a word traded in a low tone near the pump. Peace is often just maintenance done before anyone else is awake to see it. Creeks write small news. Weather writes the headlines. Birds carry footnotes. Meadowlarks announce a good morning long before people do. Nighthawks stitch dusk together with thread you hear but barely see. Antelope stand at a respectful distance and make a room of the plain, then vanish by deciding to. Sometimes far north sends down curtains of green light that drape the horizon like a borrowed festival. No one explains it. Everyone accepts the gift. Willow along the water edge is winter's promise waiting to be cut. Baskets begin as lengths that know how to say yes. A lap becomes a workshop. A knife finds the measure without measuring. Over and under turns into a shape that holds apples, eggs, kindling, and days. When the rim is whipped and the handle set, the basket looks as if it might have grown there by itself, then politely agreed to go places. Line shacks keep the sort of company workmen appreciate when the pasture runs wide. A bunk, a stove with an honest drawer, a shelf with beans and coffee that do not mind the date, and a window that frames the hill you need to watch. In weather, the walls talk a little. In fair days, they listen. A brand is heated, a post tamped, a count repeated until it is boring, which is the point. Many small rites make one big calm. Mining towns wake and sleep in a different meter, but learn the same manners where it counts. The hoist coughs up a cage with faces dusted to the same color. A whistle reads noon and quitting time. The assay slip in a pocket rides home next to a lunch pail with half a biscuit left. Arguments start, then decide they would rather be card games. Someone sings off-key and gets better by the second chorus. The mountain keeps its own counsel and people keep theirs, and both are respected. Out at the claim shanty, a rocker moves like a cradle built for pebbles. Water, sand, hope, the same three pieces as the creek pan, only multiplied by hours. A tin cup waits in the shade and knows the temperature by feel. When the sun leans west, a small pile of concentrate glints like a private joke between day and hand. Sometimes you cache it, sometimes you keep it for looking. Either way, you walk back lighter than you came. Evenings that do not ask for talk often invite repairs that smile. A chair learns a new rung and stands prouder. A lantern gets a fresh mantle and breathes evenly again. A shutter hinge finds center with the help of a sliver of leather. You put away each tool where it belongs, not for tidiness alone, but because tomorrow has a better chance when things can be found in the dark. Some nights a lecture tent returns with a trunk of wonders. Seashells that sound like other weather, a chart of the heavens, a magnet that surprises a room into silence. The speaker has a pocket watch that never seems to hurry him, and he leaves a phrase behind that the town will try on for weeks. The Milky Way. Fossil. Electric. Children draw pictures they've never seen with a confidence borrowed from the lantern slide. The tense ropes leave clean lines in the dirt, and by morning, the ground has already started to forget. Chores find their winter versions and their summer ones. In heat, water asks for a path and shade asks for chairs. In cold, wood asks for company and bread asks for more time. The same hands answer both sets of questions without complaint, and the house learns two languages it will never stop speaking. The reward is not dramatic. It is the way the door closes right with one hand when the other holds a bowl. If your eyes have not closed, walk the quiet rounds one last time. See the beam in the wheelwright's vise, truer than it was at noon, the cheese in its cloth, willing to wait, the cellar cool and certain, the rail line straight as a thought that decided well. See the lamp on the marshal's desk, low and kind, the willow basket leaning where morning will find it, the line shack stove breathing easy, the creek reflecting the piece of sky it borrowed. Inhale for 4 and let the breath trace the rim of a barrel. Hold for a soft half-beat, the pause before the watch ticks again. Exhale for 6 and feel the bed agree with your weight, the way a well-set post agrees with the fence. Again, slower each time, until breath is the only work left, and the night, steady as ever, finishes the rest. All the scattered pieces of the day settle into one quiet shape. Water sets the route, heat sets the pace, light sets the hours, distance sets the price, and repairs keep the whole plan honest. Nothing here is cruel, only constant. Nothing shouts, everything asks. When life stands on effort, small wins feel large. A hinge that stops arguing, dough that rises in a cool room, a bucket that reaches the shelf without a spill. You don't survive the West by being hard all the time. You survive by being steady more often than not. That is why a single day can outrun a modern habit. It isn't danger that wears you down, but the sum of kindly demands that never miss their turn. Drink before you are thirsty, warm before you are cold, mend before you are broken, plan before you are lost. Comfort is not a switch, it's a row of doors that all need the right key. The myth is loud, but the truth is simple. The West asks for attention, and it asks all day. Take that understanding with you and let it lighten your pillow. A tap, a switch, a paved path, a full pantry. These are quiet riches that used to cost a morning, a mile, or a season. Gratitude is not a speech. It's the way the shoulders drop and the breath lengthens. Tomorrow will be kinder if you remember what held today together. Hands that knew their work, neighbors who kept their word, and the patient tools that asked only to be put back where they belong. Let's close the day the way good houses do. Dim the room one notch, feel the blanket keep rather than hold. Inhale for a calm count of 4, letting your ribs widen without effort. Hold for a soft half beat, the time it takes a latch to catch. Exhale for 6 and feel the bed agree with your weight, like a well-set post with a fence. Again, a little slower. Picture the path to the well, the pump handle leaning where morning can find it, the gate that swings without complaint, the first star arriving without announcement. If a thought taps the window, let it sit on the porch till morning. If these quiet walks help, save this episode for the nights that ask for gentler company. Subscribe if you like journeys told in a low voice and an even pace. And tell me, what time and place should we stroll through next, slowly enough to notice how it really worked?